So today's discussion is going to be all about building confidence in yourself and your yoga teaching practice. And this is something that I do get regular inquiries about. How do I build confidence? How do I feel confident standing on the mat in front of a class? Um, and the first thing I want to say about that is, like, you will build confidence, um, but it's not the most important thing that you're developing as a teacher in training. Like, there's other things to focus on, developing skills and knowledge and strategies for your teaching practice. And confidence might seem like a really important ingredient, and it can be really useful, I'll admit, but it's not always there when you first start out as a yoga teacher. So how do you begin if you don't already have that confidence? So that's what we're going to talk about today, how you can build confidence in your teaching. And we're also going to talk about um, how you can teach without being the most confident of teachers, how you can step up on the mat when you're not feeling confident or when you feel like you're not feeling brave. And to me, that's by embracing who you are, your essence, and being authentic, um, even if that confidence doesn't arrive. Um, so over the years, I've heard from lots of new teachers or teachers in training who are concerned about confidence and are having that dilemma where they're waiting to feel more confident before they teach, but how you build confidence is by teaching. So it's kind of a catch-22. It keeps you stuck in sort of a cycle. So at some point, you do have to get started, whether the confidence is there or not. And that's what I want to talk about today. We're going to talk about practicalities of building confidence, um, and maybe a few strategies to kind of get you on your way, right? Um, and I want to mention that confidence looks different for everyone. So I'm really interested in hearing other people's experiences about confidence and dig into how you build confidence and self assurance, while continuing to be your wonderful, unique, authentic self, right? So that you can hold space for yourself and hold space for your students. So I think I've come up with 8 points so far to go through. But I'm also hoping that you've maybe brought some questions or insights or ideas or experiences to share, so that we can really dig into this topic. So my first point is that teaching yoga is not a performance, right? Um, and so it's really important that you be yourself on the mat and that you allow yourself space to make mistakes as a new teacher. So that's kind of the first step, is to know that it's not a performance. You're not stepping on the mat and having to be someone else, having to be your favorite yoga teacher or a famous yoga teacher or teachers you've seen before. You can just be yourself on that mat, right? And you might have had teachers in the past who've projected a lot of confidence, or knowingness or spirituality or calm. But if that's not you, you don't have to pretend that it is. You can really be yourself, be genuine, and again, give yourself room to be in a place of discovery, to be learning about who you are as a teacher, knowing that your authenticity is what's going to help connect you with your students on a deeper level, right? The other thing I want to say about that it's not a performance is that it takes a lot of energy to put on that kind of performance. It's hard work pretending to be someone or something that is not consistent with you. And it's not really in the spirit of yoga to be putting on a persona rather than being yourself. Yoga is all about getting to know yourself, understanding yourself, being in your true nature. So that has to be part of our teaching practice, right? How we show up on that mat in front of the class is part of what we're modeling of yoga to our students. So if you're putting on a persona, how are you creating connection? How are you demonstrating yoga? And how are you developing intimacy with your class and with your students, right? Having said all that, that doesn't mean let it all hang out. Like, there is professionalism that is important. But who is your most authentic professional yoga teacher self? That's the thing you want to get to know, right? And that's something that's going to build over time. Rather than fake it till you make it, I subscribe to the feel the fear and do it anyway strategy. Because once you start faking, it can be hard to stop, right? And it's exhausting, and it can leave you feeling really disconnected from your students, and that's the opposite of what we want. What we want is to create connection. Nervousness means you care, right? So feeling nervous before a class is completely natural. Even experienced teachers feel it. And feeling nervous means you care, and caring is a good thing, right? You care about your students, you care about their well-being, you care about doing a good job, and those are all good things. So consider how you might embrace your nervousness as like a positive indicator of your commitment to delivering the best experience possible for your students. Like, I'm going to be nervous, and it's because I care, and I'm going to do it anyway. And I'll just bring my nerves along with me, right? So embracing the fact that nerves will be there and letting them come along for the ride, but not letting that be your primary focus. Oh, I'm nervous. Understand, yeah, you're nervous, and it's because you care, and you're going to take your caring and focus that on your students rather than focusing your nerves on what you're doing, right? So nervousness means you care. That's point number 2. Point number 3, this one's important. It's all about your students, right? So whilst you want to do a great job as a teacher, it's important that the focus should be on the student's experience, on their safety and well-being, on their experience of yoga. That's the thing, not your performance as a teacher. And shifting your perspective from you to them can really help alleviate some of the pressure that you might feel as a teacher, right? So when you're feeling nervous and you're lacking confidence, sometimes you can get into your own little bubble of thinking about yourself and worrying about, am I going to say the right things? Am I going to do the right things? Am I going to remember my cues? Am I going to forget my sequence? Rather than staying in that bubble, turn your vision out towards your students into what their needs are. What do they need in the moment? So when you keep your eyes on what your students need in the moment, often your cues will flow much better. Your sequence will flow much better because you're looking at your students and focusing your attention on what they need from moment to moment, rather than being really self-conscious and thinking about what you're supposed to be doing, right? So that's my 3rd point. It's not about you, it's all about them. My 4th point is that confidence grows with practice. And for most of us, confidence isn't something that happens overnight. It grows with practice. And how we build confidence, how we build self-esteem is by doing things that challenge us, things that we're not entirely sure we're going to be successful at the first time out, right? That's how we build self-esteem, taking on something that I'm not sure if I can really do this and doing it. So again, this is the feel the fear and do it anyway strategy. Knowing that each class you teach is an opportunity for growth, for your personal growth and for your professional growth. So like, don't wait for perfect before you teach, right? But do be ready. So if you genuinely can't hold a safe space for yourself as a teacher yet, then don't teach professionally yet, right? Find some friends to teach with as you build your comfort on the mat in the front of the class, as you develop the groundedness to hold that space for yourself. It's important that you can be empowered on your mat before you can empower your students on their mats, right? So confidence grows with practice. Don't wait for perfect, but do be ready. Do be able to hold space for yourself. Okay, that was my fourth point. Sometimes your family and friends are the best students, right? Sometimes they can be the trickiest students. Sometimes it's a lot easier to teach to strangers than it is to teach to the people closest to you. So what I recommend is teach to the people who will help you build your confidence, right? Teach to people who can hold space for you while you learn how to hold space for them. So if you've got a family member who's going to fidget and complain and get distracted and run out and put on a load of laundry and come back while you're teaching, maybe that's not the ideal person to have in your class. Choose people to teach that will be good students for you to build up that confidence muscle, right? And sometimes that's your closest friends and family, and sometimes it's not. So that's about kind of making choices that work for you. And yeah, again, sometimes it's people who are a step removed from you that are a little bit easier to hold space for when you're getting started. So that really depends on your personal circumstances, right? I don't think it's a great idea to teach to people who might impact your confidence when you're first starting out. Someone who might, again, be distracted or restless or overly critical, give you too much feedback for this moment in time, right? So, the people closest to you best, who's going to be a good student and who's maybe going to be a more problematic student. Sometimes it's easier to grab some neighbors together to teach to, right? So those are choices that you can make given your unique circumstances. And don't forget that if you don't have anyone in your household that you think is going to be a good student for this time of your teaching practice, find some folks online that you can teach to, right? Your old college roommate might be a great student for you to practice teaching with. I hope that helps with that question. Let me check my notes. Point number 5. Draw from other areas of confidence. So this is about considering how you've built confidence in other areas of your life, maybe in your education or your career or your hobbies or your art. And can you transfer some of that confidence into your teaching practice and draw on it when you need a boost? So the question I'm asking here is, have you built confidence in other areas of your life, and how did you do it? How did you build confidence? Having a chance to practice and know that, like, really, it's not a disaster when it doesn't go perfectly well. Like, to be able, for me, one of the things that I think helped me build confidence is knowing that if I say left instead of right, no one dies from that. That's not a big deal. Being able to see that, first of all, that you can hold space for yourself, that you can do it. And then that if there are mistakes, which is the thing that I worried about most, was making mistakes. If I make mistakes, I can correct those, that those aren't a disaster. They're just a learning experience, right? And that I can come back from that. I can come back from making a mistake and flow on, and it doesn't have to end the class. And that's not everyone's concern. That's not everyone's sort of trigger, is making mistakes. For some people, they feel like they'll stand on the mat and their mind will go blank, or, so whatever the thing that creates your nervousness is, Um, Being able to practice and maybe see that concern come to life and know that you can move past it, that's a thing that can really help you develop confidence, right? So this point is kind of about like thinking about other areas of your life where you lacked confidence and you built confidence, and seeing if you can transfer those strategies and skills into teaching yoga. So for public speaking, which there's elements of public speaking that can be similar to teaching yoga, you are speaking in front of a group of people. Those are transferable skills. Being able to take the confidence you developed in that area and bring it into your yoga teaching practice. And again, for me, one of those things was knowing that if I made a mistake, that it wasn't a disaster, that I could correct that and move on from that and learn from that. So that's important. Point number 6. This is a really important one. And I think this is a useful life lesson in general. No one's really thinking about you. It can be really easy to get caught up in the idea that your students are like scrutinizing your every move. But the truth is that they're not. Like most people are primarily focused on themselves and their practice and their own experience. And knowing that can help you let go of a lot of unnecessary self-consciousness. So no one's leaving your class and talking about how you mixed up your left and right? That one time. We think about our students all the time, but it can be relaxing to know that they aren't thinking about us. They're not going away from our class and still thinking about us as they move on into their day. They're thinking about themselves and their practice and their lives. And that's really where we should be keeping the focus, right? So this is a good thing to remember in teaching yoga and in life. No one's really thinking about you, right? You should be thinking about you and developing your teaching practice. You should be thinking about your students and helping them develop their practice, but know that they're not 2 days after class still thinking about, you mixed up your sequence from left to right. That's just not something students are doing. We know this because we know as yoga students, we're not walking around thinking about our yoga teacher from Monday night on a Thursday. We're not still thinking, she said arm instead of leg. You're not thinking about that. So why would your students be thinking that about you? And we can really catastrophize really small things, especially when we first get started. And so it's good to remember that they're not thinking about you. And you can remember that if you get a bad haircut or, other disasters that happen in your life. People aren't really thinking about you all that much at all. And I find that very relaxing to know. Yeah. Number 7 point, confidence does not equal knowledge, and confidence does not equal success. Some of the best teachers the most effective, the most inspiring teachers struggle with confidence. And I would go so far as to say every teacher has had confidence wobbles from time to time, right? And the key is to keep on teaching, to keep on listening, and to keep on learning and trying things and giving yourself space to evolve. This is a tricky one because confidence and charisma are very attractive qualities. And we see them a lot in leaders and teachers, and we see them a lot in social media, but they don't necessarily mean that someone is knowledgeable. And they aren't the only admirable qualities. So I think it can be useful to remember that and to think about building on your own inherent traits. Curiosity and compassion and excitement and quiet and openness and nurturing and encouraging, whatever's authentic for you. So if you're not the boldest or the most charismatic teacher, what is authentic for you, and letting that come out, highlighting that with your students, right? so much of what we see these days, everywhere we look, is people with a lot of charisma and a lot of confidence. And again, that's very attractive. And to a certain extent, we trust people with a lot of confidence. But people with confidence aren't necessarily more knowledgeable than people who are less confident, right? Loud people aren't right more than quiet people are right, or useful, or helpful, or caring, right? When we feign confidence, when we pretend to have confidence, I feel like sometimes that can lead us to to do things and say things that we actually aren't confident about, that aren't true for us, or that aren't useful to our students. Um, and that's when that can become problematic. And I've definitely fallen into that trap many times, feeling like I have to be the most knowledgeable person in the room. And then when a student comes to me with an issue, I try to be knowledgeable about that as well. And it's outside of my scope of practice. So if confidence isn't natural for you, or being a big shiny star at the front of the room, you don't have to be that, right? You can just be yourself and know that confidence, again, does not equal knowledge, right? We're so attracted to confidence, and we're so attracted to charismatic leaders. Um, and they haven't necessarily proved anything to us about their knowledge or their skill or how much they care. They just are sparkly. And I don't know, as a human species, we maybe need to learn about that a little bit, um, because it can get us into danger, right? Um, so even if you don't come across as the most charismatic and confident teacher, being able to rely on your knowledge and stay within your scope of practice, those are more useful to your students than being a sparkly character at the front of the class. And that, I think that's a useful thing to know. Um, okay, point number 8 is find what works for you. So I don't know any quick life hacks for building confidence, but you might for yourself. So you might have a trick or two that works for you to get started, right? To find your place on the mat and to ground and to get present so that your mind doesn't run off towards overthinking or nervousness or catastrophizing, right? Sometimes it's just a matter of opening a class and then it all kind of flows from there. So I've gathered some ideas from former students that I wanted to share about this. And one of them is have notes or don't have notes, right? Sometimes making and having notes with you gives you a sense of stability and gives you a sense that, if I forget my words, I can rely on, I've got my sequence written out, or I've got some notes, and that's going to help me. And that helps you to ground. Or sometimes it's a distraction. So find out what works for you. Sometimes the process of writing out your sequence or your notes, that's enough, and you don't necessarily have to have them with you. They can be under your mat rather than next to your mat. Sometimes you want to have those there, and that gives you a sense of grounding. Sometimes if you find yourself looking at your notes more than your students, that's when it can be kind of a distraction. So again, figuring out what works for you. Another strategy is to find a friendly face in the crowd to focus on, right? If looking at a, a group of people is what causes your nervousness, then you can start out by teaching to 1 or 2 people, right? Focus on them, send out the cues and the refinements and the teaching strategies that they need, and eventually you can open your focus to the whole class. That can be really useful if your lack of confidence or your nervousness comes from seeing too many eyeballs all at once. Find one set of eyeballs. Another strategy similar to that is sometimes as a new teacher, it can be useful to take a break from eyeballs, to take a break from all the faces looking at you, if that's what causes you to feel a little bit of nerves or panic. And child's pose is a great place to put students if you need that break to recollect yourself so that you can focus on the students, or down dog. If you need it, you can take a bit of breathing space if you start to get shaky so that you can come back and refocus on your students. Okay. Another point is to change the narrative. And this might seem like semantics, but I know that this has worked for some students. Changing the narrative from I'm a teacher and you are the students, and having that kind of hierarchy and separation, to I'm a guide and we're going to do yoga together. Let's go on this journey together. And again, it might seem like semantics, but for some of us, that's really useful to kind of change the narrative and switch up the sense that you're there alone on the mat and that your students are all out there separate from you. So to emphasize that we're doing this together rather than that me versus the class feeling. And it seems like a small thing, but if it matters to you, then know that that's a strategy that can be really useful. And that it also creates a nice community vibe in your class. So be willing to sort of change that narrative if that's what works for you. And this might take a little bit of practice, but like whatever it is, starting with music or starting with no music, having an opening routine or ritual, having silence at the start of class if that works for you, sharing a theme if that gives you some grounding to do a reading or share something. Find what works for you to get grounded and present, and then let your class flow from there. So sometimes it's a matter of starting your class in a way that supports you, and then your class can flow. So that's something to think about. To have a routine for yourself before the students arrive of, I lower the lights, I put on the music, I light the candles, I set the space, I put out my mat. All of those things can become like a ritual that is like a gateway of consciousness that helps you step from, preparing for a yoga class me to now I'm holding space for myself and my students for yoga class. It can be kind of a gateway of through mindset or through consciousness. And when you're feeling nervous, there's body brain chemicals rushing around your body, kind of keeping that nervousness going. Doing physical things, like even those sort of domestic physical tasks of setting up your room, that can help you move those body brain drugs so that you can come to a place of groundedness and feeling safe and secure in the environment you've created, and then inviting your students into that safe and secure environment. Yeah, so that's a really good point. And that leads to my last point, which is care and holding space. So ultimately, what matters more than confidence is caring, and caring for your students and holding space for both yourself and your students to feel safe and to practice and to grow and to learn about yourselves, right? So your genuine care and the supporting environment that you create, those are the foundation that you want to build your teaching practice on, rather than confidence, right? The confidence can come from having practice doing that. So, so that's what I want to say. As you remember that building confidence is an ongoing process, and it's not necessarily a process that looks like this. I started with no confidence and now I have all of it. It's something that's in flux all the time. And it's not necessarily the thing that you want to make the bedrock of your teaching practice. That your knowledge and your ability and your caring are things that you want to build as the bedrock of your teaching practice, the foundation of your teaching practice. So again, embrace your authentic self, be yourself on the mat. That's the simplest way to developing confidence and creating connection with your students. Remember that your nervousness is a sign that you care, and that's important. Um, know that your confidence will grow with time and practice. Find out what strategies work for you, whether that be having an opening ritual or having notes in front of you or starting with silence, whatever it is. Um, and give yourself space to develop and learn how you will make a positive impact on your students. So that's what I have to say about confidence. I hope that's been helpful. I know that it's something that um, a lot of students feel really concerned about. And of course, you want to feel empowered and safe and not so self-conscious standing, that's a negative, but standing on the mat in front of the class. Um, but sometimes what it takes to get there is to stop thinking about that. So that's something to remember. To just for, like I don't have confidence right now, but I'm going to teach and then we'll see what happens, right? And again, if you genuinely don't feel like you can hold a safe space for yourself, um, keep teaching to your family and friends, your supportive family and friends, or neighbors, or whoever you've gathered up to be your practice students. Um, and give yourself space to build that confidence muscle so that you can take that out and share it with the world. Yeah. Yeah. So thank you very much for being here. Hello to those of you who will be listening to the recording, and I'll see you all next week. Thank you.